The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
It's that time of the week where it's time to put your mind, your mission, your mind. It's Mission Minded with my good friend Michael Coleman. Of course, he's formerly the Jimmy Hill Mission, now with the Montgomery Food Bank. How long have you been down there now?
Oh, just in my fifth month, but not in a bad way. It seems like I've been here 5 years just because we've been tackling a lot of stuff, but not in a bad way, but just so many challenges and time goes by so quick, but we feel like we've gotten so much accomplished, and looking back, I'm just in my fifth month. Well, I guess technically now that we're in December, I guess my 6th month.
There you go.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Before we get into our show today, tell people how they can help the Montgomery Food Bank, because I know obviously with the holidays here, this is a very needful time.
So you can go to mafb.org, which stands for Montgomery Area Food Bank.org. And support us in any way that you can. If you're in the Montgomery area, close to it, you can do food drives. But we're able to really stretch dollars through our system. 1.2 pounds of food equals one meal, and we can do 5 meals for $1.
Wow!
Through our system. And so those of you who have the opportunity to donate, that's always appreciated and always helpful that we can take those dollars and really be able to address some real food insecurity and hunger in our area.
We have a great topic we want to get into. Michael Coleman, info at TonyKurreRadio.net. Info at Tony Kurre, that's Kurre with a K, K-U-R-R-E, info at TonyKurreRadio.net. We'll read your email questions. We'll start with one. Then I want to get into this great story you sent me last week. We had so many email questions last week. We failed to get to it. MIT researchers finding the number one reason why people quit. We'll talk about that in a second. Lane in Montgomery, though, has a question for Michael Coleman. He said, how prevalent is it to ask for a raise basically just off the cost of living? Inflation goes up every year. Obviously, inflation has been through the roof of the last few months, and they're getting towards the end of the year, and everyone's doing evaluations, and everyone usually gets some type of bump yearly at his place of employment. But is it safe to ask for just based off what the percentages and the inflation are? Is that fair to do when inflation knocks off? You don't want to have to give it back, right? How does that normally work?
Right. And part of that is, it's legitimate to ask, especially like historically, our country's been, 2 or 3%. When I say historically, let's say the last, 10 to 15 years, 2 to 3% inflation per year. And so the way it's laid out is you have to get, just to maintain where you are, you have to get that 2 to 3% just to remain. You're not progressing, you're just covering the increased cost of living. And then you hit some years like we've had where you have, anywhere from 7, 8, 9%, 10%. It's very difficult for any business to be able to keep up with that pace. So you feel like, hey, I'm losing ground, because even if the cost of living is 8% and I get a 5% raise, I'm still in the negative. So every company, you have to understand that companies give raises lots of times based on several factors. One is on the merit of whether it's earned or not, and others do it based on how successful they've been. Like, I've been in situations where I didn't have a lot of extra money and had people who I really wanted to reward and could talk with them about having a raise, but really just didn't have the money to give them. And then you see others who maybe are doing great as a business, and this is typically for for-profit, where they're doing great with the business, but for whatever reason, they don't want to share that with employees or bless the employees or whatever. And sometimes it's warranted, maybe sometimes it's not. In other words, it's just not as simple as, is it okay to ask? Because I will tell you this, anytime, in my opinion, it's okay to ask for a raise, or at least have a conversation about it. But you also need to understand, when you go into those kind of negotiations, you need to listen from a company's perspective, and then what the reasons are. So, for instance, I've had people who've come in to work for me, and they've agreed on a certain salary, and then within 90 days, they're they're asking for more money. And I listen to their requests. I listen to what their justifications are. I walk them through that. But then I try to always be honest with them about where they stand, about what they're doing well, where they need to improve. And so it's just, you're not going to find a standard across the board. Every boss is different. Every company is different. Every company culture is different. But I will tell you, there's certainly nothing wrong with going to your boss and sitting down and not demanding a raise, but just saying, hey, with the cost of living, I'm fighting just to keep, ends meeting. Yeah. And so can you give me some insights or as to what to expect this year, as to whether you think there's going to be raises handed out or not, so that I can plan for me and my family, do us in the best interest of me and my family. So I think all that's very reasonable.
Yeah, Michael, do you ever offer raises? I mean, do you wait for the employee to come to you? I'm a business owner, and
no.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, if someone's doing a great job and you fear that perhaps they're going to leave because they're doing such a great job, you want to take care of those employees. But do you ever offer, or is that just something where you wait for them to come in?
No, absolutely, I do. And sometimes when I've hired somebody and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start you here, and right away you see that there's more potential. I want them to know that, hey, I'm looking at giving you more responsibility, and with more responsibility, you should expect more compensation. And yeah, there's been time, I will tell you, when I got here to the food bank, I looked at the pay chart and I really thought that the average employee here was underpaid. Uh-huh. Now it was just my perspective. I'm not saying they weren't. Just I felt like that when you compared them to Feeding America puts out this job scale for each job, and they do it by region, so you can kind of get a perspective of what a warehouse manager makes in the Southeast in food banks. So you can kind of balance. And I just felt like a lot of our salaries were on the lower end. And so I told people, my intention was that I'm gonna come right in and I'm gonna try to do a salary adjustment to pay you what I think it's worth. But then that goes back to I tell them, hey, I'm gonna give you a good salary. I'm gonna give you all the tools you need to be successful, all the training you need to be successful, everything you need. But I'm gonna demand high accountability and high performance. Not unreasonable, but if I'm giving you everything you need and the tools that you need, the money that you need, everything, then I'm going to expect a high standard. And the truth of the matter is, when you come into and any organization is going to suffer from this, you're going to have high achievers. You're going to have those who are very mediocre. And regardless of how much money you give them, they're not either willing or able to step up and work at a high pace. So, I mean, every time you go into one area, you unravel 5 or 6 other things that are factors that go into how much you pay somebody. So I will tell you this, though. I do not wait. If I know somebody's good and I know I can count on them and they show up every day and they work hard and they care about the organization, then I'm not going to wait for them to threaten to leave me. I'm going to go to them and express their value, and talk about what I can do to meet their needs in terms of taking care of their families, because replacing somebody is so expensive, and especially anytime you replace somebody, it's a real roll of the dice as to whether you get the person you need. So I say, hey, I know what I have here, and I'm gonna do everything I can to provide an environment in which they can thrive and they can be rewarded, but also not have to go look for another job.
Yeah. He's Michael Coleman. This is Mission Minded. It runs every single day at 10 o'clock Central Time, wherever you're listening. Obviously, a huge part of our listening audience within about 100 miles of the Birmingham area, but we got them all over the country, and we take your email questions, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. And this is more just about the Huntsville or the Montgomery Food Bank and the Huntsville areas and everywhere else, the 35 counties you cover. You don't cover the Huntsville area, do you? It's a mainly.
No, the North Alabama Food Bank does that, and they do a great job. But yeah, that's a little bit out of our territory.
Yeah, but we'll take your email questions from anywhere. One more here before we get into our topic. Quickly, Sherry in Dothan This is an interesting question, and I'm going to paraphrase it here because it's a long email. She's starting a new business. There are other businesses in her area that are already doing what she wants to do. She just thinks she can do it better. And she's got business strategists who are telling her that in order to do this business, and again, she didn't tell me what that business is, that she needs to do something different. She needs to have a gimmick. She needs to do something that is already successful and do it at a different level. But she's like, I just know I can do better at what this particular business already is. What's your thoughts on that? I think a lot of people always feel like they have to be gimmicky or they have to have something different. But that doesn't always mean you're going to be successful. But if you have great service and you're doing something just better than anyone else, sometimes it's successful.
Yeah. Well, so you got a couple of issues to work through there. One is, let's say there's already several pizza places and let's say you're going to open up a pizza shop.
That's a great example.
Yeah. And so you're like, okay, well, there may be enough demand that I can open up another pizza shop because there's a void there because whatever widget I'm selling, there's the demand is still high for those widgets. But if I have to take market share away from somebody, then I'm going to need to have a product that bests them in some way. Now, I think I shared this story, but it's way back at the beginning. But a lot of people, because I've started a nonprofit and operated it from the very, grown it from an idea all the way through. When a lot of people have an idea for a nonprofit, and you could just look at that as a business startup, they come talk to me. And as I walk them through, I remember this one young African-American lady, very bright, very passionate about mentoring. She came to me and said, I'm very interested in starting a nonprofit about mentoring. And I said, okay, well, this was years ago. I said, well, I think there's probably, 15 mentoring programs at different agencies, different nonprofits around Montgomery. And she said, yeah, but I think I can do it. And I said, okay, well, I tell you what, let's role play for a second. You make me your pitch. I'm going to be a potential donor. And so she started making me, I listened to her and I said, okay, I got a question. There's already 15 mentoring programs. Tell me why I would put money into your program as opposed to one that's already established and up and running. Mm-hmm. And she didn't have a good answer for that. And I told her, but that's when you're talking about filling in a space in a marketplace, whether you're for profit or especially nonprofit, the first thing they're going to say is, in the nonprofit realm is there a need for this? So you could have, let's say, a homeless shelter. Well, if you don't have a homeless problem, or if you've already got somebody doing that well in your community, then the question would be, why are you starting something and pulling resources to that? And it's likely not going to be successful because it's not that people aren't willing to fill that need, but they don't see it as a legitimate need. Now, for profit, again, different mindset, but you're out there having to compete in the marketplace. And so people are going to, if people are dissatisfied with the product they're getting from other places, and there may be a lot of people going, I wish that there was a new pizza place coming in, then, hey, you might be stepping into filling that dissatisfaction and pulling that market share towards you. But without that demand, then you have to figure out that just because I open it doesn't mean it's going to be successful. So I think what the marketers are saying, and rightly so in many degrees, is you have to, why are you in the marketplace? What do you bring to the table? So look at Papa John's. It comes in and goes. You think, oh, you already had Domino's. You already had Pizza Hut. There's no space for a Papa John's. And they come in and say, hey, we're always fresh. And then everybody just comes in with their own perspective and tries, oh, well, the pizza here or this product is X, Y, and Z. And so she really needs to think hard about that. The vast majority of new businesses fail. I would say the vast majority of nonprofits are not successful, not because of the people who are starting them are not passionate, But again, it goes back to what I said about, some people just believe if they do it, they're going to be successful. And sometimes you just can't will yourself through the business world, just because you want it to happen. You've got to have a reason. There's got to be a reason people are going to stop going where they're going now and come to you. And she's got to figure out what that is and market that reason successfully. And I think that's probably what everybody's telling her.
There you go. He is Michael Coleman. He's the man, Montgomery Food Bank. They serve over 35 counties right here in the great state of Alabama. He's formerly the Jimmy Hill Mission. He's been in business his entire life. And this is a show not only about non-for-profits, but also business. It's called Mission Minded here. We'll get your email questions. We try to trickle those in whenever we get a chance. info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Of course, you can find us on our Tony Curry Radio Podcast Network. All right, so you sent this article last week. This is really interesting. MIT researchers have found the number one reason that employees quit is
toxic work culture.
Yeah, toxic work culture. And that makes sense, but that's a very broad, general term because there's a lot of things in a work culture that could be considered toxic, whether you just feel uncomfortable, whether you're underappreciated, whether you're not making the right money. When you read that initial headline, when you think of toxic culture in the workplace, what's the first thing you think of?
Yeah, to me, it is dysfunction. Toxic doesn't necessarily mean that, there's all this backbiting and all this throwing each other under the bus. But a toxic work culture is one, to me, is where you enter in and there's not clear processes it's just dysfunction, and some people are on one sheet of music and other people on another sheet of music. And so everything that you're doing is unclear, and it's you're just slogging through the mud, and it just zaps you of any sort of energy, or where you leave there at the end of the day and you don't feel like you've accomplished anything. And a lot of businesses just don't pay sufficient attention to the importance of work culture and all that. And so and just for the audience, I'm not writing these articles. I'm not the subject matter expert. What I do is I read articles like this, and then I compare it to things I've experienced or things that I've heard others experience, and just try to say, yeah, this hits home with me for this reason, or yeah, I've experienced this, and so by sharing this, I'm hoping to help others anticipate some of these things to save them the problems. And so the thing that grabbed me about this was not so much that they proved that MIT in a study showed that it was about toxic work cultures were the main reason people left. It was the fact that it's so difficult to identify them during the recruitment process. And, when you're coming into a company, wouldn't it be great if there was a way you could identify whether a company had a toxic work culture before you sign on the dotted line that you were coming to work for them? And so that's kind of what the gist of this article was all about. It's written by an organizational psychologist named Adam Grant. And he just said, his suggestion was, he points out a couple of things in there about the key signals of a bad work culture, but then identifying how could you possibly go about identifying these before you get trapped into it and it's too late.
I think it's really interesting because a lot of time, and it's like a football team, right? I mean, when everyone's, the definition of unity is when everyone's doing their role at the best level they possibly can. You put all those pieces together and you have a unit. And that's I learned that from Xavier University in psychology class. But you're always going to have pieces that aren't doing their role. They're not doing the work that they need to do to be a successful piece. And that can certainly add to a toxic culture because you have other people covering other people's whats. Obviously, if one person is not doing their job and it's representative of what you've got to do, and maybe you're in a chain situation where if they don't do their job right, then you're having to fix their parts. So, I mean, and again, it depends on whether if you've got like 3 or 4 people you're working with and you could sit and meet with them every week and talk to them every week, it's one thing. If you've got a business where you have 1,000 employees, I'd imagine it's very, very difficult. Just talk about the general culture of making sure, and you're very, very good at this, and making sure your employees are all on the same page.
Yeah, so like he points out here a couple of examples he uses as an organization. He says is is not going to tolerate disrespect or abuse. So think about it from an employee's perspective. You're in a group dynamic, and certain employees are allowed to get away with certain things that others aren't.
Yes.
Okay. So you're playing favoritism. And so some are excluded. Sometimes you may see a boss make an unethical decision or a very self-serving. And so you don't feel like there's a consistency across management. Or you may see people throw each other under the bus. It's a sales positions and it's real cutthroat. Or you may see like a guy who's a great salesman, he may feel like he can bow up on the supervisors, whatever he wants to. And so, again, different standards for different employees, different managers treat different people different ways. It's all of that can really wear on you. But the flip side of that is also something that I encounter in the nonprofit world quite a bit, and that is mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to what I said a long time. One of the greatest problems in the nonprofit world is that you'll have a lot of people that lead nonprofits that are very passionate about the mission and are very knowledgeable and very caring, but they don't know a thing about running a business. And if you do not run a nonprofit is a business. And if you do not run it as a business, if you only focus on what you're doing, it might survive, but you won't have the impact and the growth that you need to make it really be as impactful as it should be. So I've seen lots of times in nonprofits, if the, it's like, well, this employee, he's probably got a lot of bandwidth, but he does all right. He comes to work most of the time, and he's not doing anything special. And so then that just kind of, everybody else goes around, and you're not rewarding excellence, and you're not empowering your people to make dynamic decisions or make dynamic impacts. And so everybody around everybody just kind of settles into where they have a ho-hum attitude. If we do well, great. But really, it's just about coming in and keeping this agency open. And, those we can help, we help. Those we don't, whatever. It's just kind of a ho-hum attitude. And that can be a toxic work culture. If you're excited about, hey, I'm going to go in and help crisis pregnancy, or I'm going to go to a food bank and help people, or I'm working at a homeless shelter, whatever it is, you're going in there because you care about these people. You're passionate about that. And if everybody around you is ho-hum, they don't really care, that can be just as impactful on you and on your psyche when you leave every day.
Something, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, something you do really well, and this is Michael Coleman, of course. It's called Mission Minded here. He's from the Montgomery Food Bank. He's the CEO. Something that you've said numerous times on this show, that it's okay to make mistakes. And I think that's really important. As long as people are trying to do the right thing, it's okay to let your employees know and build a culture of, hey, listen, as long as we don't have failures around here, we have learning experiences. And if you make now we're not talking about a person who makes the same mistake over and over and over again. But if you do make a mistake, own up to it, know that the boss has got your back, and you'll move on, right?
Yeah. So I will tell you something. We had one of the biggest challenges, and I learn stuff all the time. I learn when I'm not communicating effectively, and I could say the same thing to a different organization, and it may be that the people there totally get what I'm saying, and then I speak it to another, and it totally goes right by. And so I'm constantly having to check myself and say, wait a minute, are you sending a message that's not resonating? And that's a me problem. That's not an employee problem. And so one of the things that I noticed here was I came into a culture where there were a lot of silos. A lot of people were very passionate. It didn't have a lot of teamwork. And so everybody had this responsibility, and, hey, I'm going to make sure my job's done. But I'm not necessarily going to coordinate and as a team. It's just, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it. And so when you're in that kind of environment, people are not taught how to delegate very well, And so I've had several people, and it's not just here, it's very common, where people are go-getters, but they don't, to delegate, it slows them down. And to delegate, there's a big risk. There's fear of failure. And I had to tell my leaders that it is just a non-starter to not delegate, that I'm going to ding you more as a as a leader who fails to delegate, I'm going to ding you worse than somebody who delegates and that person fails. I've told them before, when I give you something new to do, you've not ever been in that place. There's a decent chance that you're going to fail. I know that going into it, but you're going to learn something. You're going to be better as a result of it. So yes, it's a risk, but risking failure, without the failure, you cannot have growth. And ultimately what I care about is I want my leaders to continue to grow, and they can't grow if I never put them in a position of risk. But the flip side of that is, what if I'm telling them that message, and then as soon as they mess up, or as soon as they have an employee that messes up that they allowed to make some decisions, that I come along and just chew them out and degrade them and yell at them and diminish them. So in other words, my actions are not backed up. I'm trying to create a safe space with my words, but I don't with my actions. And as a result, that's causing them to shy away or to back away. And so it's really upon me as a leader. I got to make sure that I'm backing up what I say. If I'm telling them it's safe to make mistakes, then I can't go off and lose my cool when they live that out in a real way.
Something that is very, very successful in a business is I love when I see the same, and I think of restaurants all the time. We're talking to Michael Coleman, by the way. This is Mission Minded. You can hear it 5 days a week. info@TonyCurryRadio.net. I love when I see the same employees every time I go into an establishment. That tells me a couple things. First of all, they must be happy because they're not leaving. Second of all, I get to know them, and if they're good at what they do, it makes me want to come back, even if the food and the service isn't necessarily wonderful, but at least I can see some friendly faces.
Right.
Talk about turnover in a business, and what about businesses where there's going to be a turnover? Say it's a seasonal business. Say it's, and I use Publix as an example. I think they do a wonderful job at Publix with their employees, but obviously you're going to have a lot of employees that are transient because it's not maybe perhaps a job they want to have a career in. Talk about that turnover.
Yeah, so one of the things, and we could do a whole show on this alone, one of the things that I got into when I was doing workforce development was there are so many reasons for turnover, and businesses today, instead of really solving some of their turnover issues and changing the culture, it's just baked into the price of doing business. So it's amazing how much money, they talk about it could be to replace a $10 an hour worker. It could end up costing a company in productivity, in advertisement, in time, interviewing, all that kind of process. It could end up costing between $6,000 and $10,000 for every employee you're going to replace. But because those aren't dollars that you're peeling off a roll out of your pocket, it's just kind of, it's lost in productivity and things like that. And so employers get real short-sighted on, I'll just get somebody else in here. But the productivity that's lost when somebody leaves, you're bringing them in, and you never know what you're going to get. And so you may bring somebody in, they're a week, boom, they're gone, and you just have this revolving door. I remember talking to an HR specialist at because Hyundai is here and manufacturers in Montgomery. And so there's a lot of tier 1 plants that support that. And I talked with him about his turnover was like at 50%. And I said, here's what you could be, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year you could save if you just cut that in half. But he was so focused on just getting a living, breathing body on the line to do that. He didn't have the bandwidth to stop and say, let's fix our processes. And it reminds me a little bit, this is kind of taking his quote a little bit out of context, but Bishop Tutu, Desmond Tutu of Africa said one time, we do a great job of rescuing people drowning in the water, but we need to go back upstream and find out why they're falling in to start with.
There you go.
And that's true when you're talking about people and life issues and things like that. But from an HR perspective, it's equally true. Like if I have a 50% turnover rate, all I'm doing is just continuing to churn people out. I need to go back up there or go back into my processes and find out, why am I losing so many people? Is it a culture? Is it a pay issue? Is it whatever? And it may even be something that you can't solve. But I will tell you this. I just saw something recently that says, lots of times when we go into a job, we're focused on prestige, and that comes with pay amount and that comes with title. It's determined whether you're happy at a job. But there's so many other things, like the environment that you're working in. Is it supportive? It's not just about what's going to give you the most dollars or give you the highest job title. It's about job satisfaction and relationships and support and being a part of a team. And are you able to achieve your life's goals and the amount of family time you're allowed to have, and just on and on and on. But sometimes we get so short-sighted rather than just step back and taking a much larger view. I know we're about to run out of time, Tony, but I just want to say one more thing going back to the article, because this is something I had not ever thought about, and it really kind of fascinated me, because even if you know how to recognize a toxic culture, lots of times you can't. If you're being interviewed, you really don't get the opportunity to have conversations to be able to properly evaluate what type of culture it is. So they just said something in the article, something about culture stories. So I read a little bit more about it, and really what he said was, if you get a job offer and you're going to a company, so you've already been offered, now's the time you want to go in and be a little bit more forward. And if you say, well, tell me how the culture is, they're going to tell you, oh, it's great. Nobody's going to say, oh, the culture here sucks. But what you do is you say, can you share with me some culture stories?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And so what they do is, and you can do this from current employees or former employees. You can question HR and just say, help me, tell me about somebody getting, promoted recently or something. And if they tell you the story, like, yeah, they got really promoted, but they stepped all over X, Y, and Z to do, then you can see, oh, okay, that's the culture that I'm walking into, that it's okay to be cutthroat. So as they tell you culture stories, you can get pearls of wisdom out of that to be like, hey, are they going to support? Are they going to work against? What's going to go on here? And that can begin to at least give you some insights as to what you're walking into, which can save you a whole lot of heartache.
I was actually offered a sales job at a radio station here locally in Birmingham, and I was like, well, and I hadn't sold radio before. I've been in radio forever, but I've been on the other side of the microphone, and right away they said, well, we're going to take this client, this client, this client, and this client who you know very, very well, and we're going to take those clients away from these salespeople, and you can start with that list. And I'm like, if you're going to take those away from people who have been working these accounts for 20 years, I don't want to work here, because the minute someone else new comes in, you'll be taking some of my accounts. So I know how that goes. So I'm like, no, thank you. Hey, Michael, great show, man. Thank you so much. I look forward to catching up with you next week. I appreciate you.
Enjoyed it as always, my friend.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.